On January 1st, 2012, Sample Company purchased a cutting machine to be used in manufacturing by paying cash of $500,000. The cutting machine had a residual value of $20,000 and an expected useful life of 10 years. Now, the requirement asks us to prepare the journal entry to record the amortization of the asset for 2013 and 2014. Now, in 2014, the beginning of the year, Sample concluded that the total useful life of the cutting machine will be 8 years rather than 10 years. So by knowing how the machine works, they've changed their estimate to 8 years instead of 10. And the residual value will now be 0 instead of 20,000. Sample uses straight line amortization for the cutting machine. So the question that asked us for number 2 says, make a journal entry to record the amortization for 2014. So in 2014, the beginning of that year, there was this change in estimate. So we need to calculate what that new amortization would be for 2014. Now, it also asks us for number 3, describe how a business should account for a change in estimate. So if there's a change in estimate, so obviously when Sample purchased the cutting machine at the beginning of 2012, they had to make some sort of estimate on the useful life of the machine and the residual value to calculate the depreciation expense of this asset. If there is a subsequent change to those estimates, the way Sample should handle that is to make that change prospectively, which means that you're going to recalculate the amortization at the date of change, and you're going to calculate and change that estimate and revise the amortization on a prospective basis. You can't go back and change the amortization expense in 2012 and 2013 because those the depreciation expense that you calculated and used and account for was based on estimates that was considered relevant at that point in time. The change only happened in 2014, and therefore we only need to make sure that that change gets affected or recalculated prospectively. So let's take a look at how we solve this question. So the asset was purchased on January 1st, 2012. It was a $500,000 asset. Residual value is $20,000 and useful life is 10 years. So for 2012, the straight line amortization, because it was bought January 1st, we've got the full year amortization, is going to be calculated as $500,000, subtract $20,000 residual value, divided by 10 years, to give us $48,000 per year. So for December 31st, 2012, our entry would be debit amortization expense or depreciation expense, $48,000. Credit accumulative amortization, cutting machine, or cumulative depreciation, cutting machine, $48,000. And for December 2013, the depreciation or amortization entry would be the same, right? Same as above, because it's straight line. Now, at the beginning of 2014, so at January 1st, 2014, there was a change in estimate. And what was the change? The change was the residual value is now 0, and the useful life is actually only 8 years. So, we need to calculate the straight line revised. How do we calculate the revised? So first, we need to calculate the net book value prior to change, which it would be January 1st, 2014. So that would be 500,000 subtract 48,000 times 2. That would give us 404,000. Minus revised residual value. The revised residual value is 0, because we're told it's 0. Divided by useful life. Now the new useful life, the revised useful life, we know it's 8 years, minus how old is the asset? We know the asset is 2 years old. So it's going to be 6 years. So the revised amortization is going to be 404 minus 0 divided by 6 years gives us 67,333 per year. So the amortization of the asset is going to be debit amortization. This is December 31st, year 4. Amortization expense would be 67,333, and credit accumulative amortization, cutting machine, 67,333. Now, I'm going to change this question a bit, and I'm going to assume that the asset was purchased not January 1st, 2012. Let's assume the asset was purchased June 30th, 2012. Okay? So first, we need to calculate the yearly amortization, just like we did in the original question. In this case, it's still straight line. The yearly amortization is 500,000 minus 20,000 residual value divided by 10 years. That gives us 48,000 per year. Now, for 2012, the first year, the amortization would be debit amortization, credit accumulative amortization. It would only be 48,000 times 6 over 12, because there's only, we bought it on June 30th, which meant that for 2012 we only had used the asset for 6 months. So this is 24,000. So you have to pay attention to the date. The date of purchase is extremely important, because that will dictate how many months we need to amortize the asset in its first year. We still have to calculate the yearly amortization, but you need to prorate it based on the number of months. Now, 2013, The entry would be for 12 months, right? So amortization expense would be $48,000, and credit a cumulative amortization cutting machine, $48,000. Now, at the beginning of 2014, we had that change, remember? At beginning of 2014, there was a change. So we know that useful life is 8 years, and residual value is 0. Okay, so step 1 is net book value prior to change. Now we know that the cost was $500,000. The cumulative would have been these 2 years, right? And that would have been $24,000 plus $48,000. It's $72,000, right? That's $428,000. Okay? Now, so we need to calculate the revised amortization expense. So straight line revised would have been 428 minus 0 divided by, now here's the hard part. The useful life is 8 years. The asset is 1.5 years old, 1.5. So 8 minus 1.5 means we've only got 6.5 years left. So we're going to take 428 divided by 6.5 to give us the yearly amortization of $65,846.15 per year. So the amortization expense for 2014, so December 31st, 14, the amortization expense, the entry would be debit amortization expense, $65,846.15, and credit accumulated amortization, $65,846.15. So the hard part about this question is, and all I did was change the date of purchase. I kept the same question the same. I kept the same facts. All I did was change the date of acquisition. So let me recap. So I changed the date of acquisition to be 6 months later, so June 30th, 2012. You still have to calculate the yearly amortization expense, which is the same as the original question, except in the first year, you would have had to prorate based on the number of months that the asset was used. So in 2012, they've only used it for 6 months. That's why the amortization expense is only half of the yearly amortization. The following year, it's the full year's amortization gets recorded. Now, I kept the same facts and said at the beginning of 2014, there was a change in estimate. The useful life went from 10 years to 8 years, and the residual value went from $20,000 to 0. So the first step is calculate net book value prior to the change. At the date of change, the asset was amortized for 1.5 years. So I took the $500,000 less the $72,000 accumulated amortization to give me my net book value of $428,000. I'm going to take that net book value, recalculate the revised straight line amortization by taking the $428,000 minus the revised residual value, which is now 0. And here's the hard part. We're going to calculate the remaining useful life. So the revised useful life is 8 years. We're going to subtract the age of the asset, which is 1.5 years. And how I got 1.5 is I only amortized it for 1.5 years because I bought it on June 30th, 2012. So that means the remaining useful life is 6.5 years. Take that, you have a new amortization of 65,846.15, and that's the amortization expense for 2014. Thank you.